being very concerned about our health, our safety, and general welfare. And Nigeria has a peculiar situation. Safety is now more important than anything else to Nigerians. In fact, I heard on the radio, they no longer use the word kidnap. They say people are getting grabbed, right? It is that rampant that the guy you saw today is you can't see him anymore because they grabbed him, type of thing. So what that means is that we are less and less excited to go out there. It's scary, right? I mean, this fall would have been fuller, not just because of COVID, but because a lot of people who typically would just want to come out for anything to gather are now very averse to that. And what that means is that they're spending more time on screens, participating in events, right? So there's this huge explosion of virtual engagement. And what we're also looking at is some interesting growth that have been forced, not by desire or design, but it has just been forced to happen. Typically, a good example is the telcos reporting that they are growing by almost 1.2 million additional active lines on a month-on-month basis since April last year, right? A browser like Opera, for example, which was at about 30 million for a long time, did a 20% growth between April to December last year. Then you look at platforms like Facebook, who only grew by about 3 million plus between last year and this year in Nigeria. So you start to have a sense of where is the growth happening, right? The number one motivation is that people now need to be more connected than ever so that they can be aware of where the trouble is coming from, right? In fact, you don't want to, you find a way to block out these WhatsApp broadcasts now because the kind of information you're getting, it gets scarier and scarier. Yesterday I saw one that said, terrible things are about to happen to all the children in Nigeria. And that thing went viral very quickly, right? So you're now dealing with a lot of people more connected, but they're getting all types of information and it's affecting their rationalization of things. So what you start to look at is, as a brand, how do I fit into this? How do I extract the positives out of these conversations, right? In a way that it will affect my brand positively. So I'll break this down into a few topics and see how that can help us today in terms of driving engagement. I like to say that there is consumer engagement and then there is customer engagement. We must do well to identify these two and communicate to them or engage with them correctly. First I would say is the explosion of content today. It's almost the definition of engagement, right? People are watching more of that snackable content, that 60-second Instagram skit. I can't remember the last time I sat down and watched a full 2-hour movie, right? That used to be the thing in the past where brands would spend a lot of money and put placements into big blockbuster movies. The new blockbusters are the guys on Instagram, they're the guys on TikTok, they're the guys who are now giving content to people who can just about afford 1 gig of data a month, right? So, in as much as we hear, oh, Netflix is big in Nigeria, it's nowhere close to Instagram, it's nowhere close to Facebook, right? Recently someone said, oh, I want to know what it will cost to advertise on Spotify. And I'm like, what do you mean? Spotify just literally came, like nobody's really there. Why do you feel there's people there for you? But brands get carried away by new stuff, shiny stuff. The reality is, when you're looking at content, you have to be very, very conscious about the distribution and the penetration of that content, right? And the ability for that content to drive engagement. Social media will still remain one of the biggest ways to drive content that would engage people. But we must look at it from a point of benefit for both the brand and the consumer. Here are 5 things that we must be aware of when we want to go through the content play. Typically, consumers will go to anywhere to get one of these. Either they want to be informed, they want to be educated, they want to be empowered, they want to be entertained, or they need support. I'll go through that again. They want to be informed, educated, empowered, entertained, or they need support. Brands can play across all these different types of content at various times in the consumer life cycle. It's just about being deliberate as to how that ties back into your broader marketing strategy and using the right channels and partners to deliver on this content. Now there's a new concept. It's called fast advertising. Way back I used to call this react advertising, where you see what's happening or what's trending and you try to plug into it as a brand. There's someone who does this really, really well. I'm not sure we know him. His name is Ryan Reynolds. He's based in the US. He used to be an actor, or he's still an actor, but he's very big in growing businesses today. He's got a mobile company called Mint Mobile. He's got an alcohol company called Aviation Gin. And then he's got a matchmaking platform called Match. He was responsible for that ad where, I'll set to play it now, where there was a connection between the devil and 2020. I don't know if some of us have seen it. It was a very beautiful piece, right? That content, because I don't like to call it advert, that content banned because it was right in the middle of conversation. But he maneuvered his way through the agony that everyone was going through in 2020 and extracted the humor out of it. And he said, when the devil makes a woman called 2020, what you have is what we're dealing with in the world today, right? So that's kind of saying 2020 was like the year of the devil, like every bad thing that happened to everybody in the world. We would say that and say that that's very negative. But when you watch that content, you're only going to end up laughing because it was so funny and true to a large extent. It took them 72 hours to produce that commercial, right? If it had taken longer, it would have met a completely different response, because not long after it launched and had gained virality, death rate numbers increased, right? If they had waited another week, they wouldn't have been able to execute. So what advertising says is, the time where you would go through a creative process to develop advertising, go into production, and you're doing something in 1 month, the insight that led to that ad may have changed because the world is moving super fast. We are in adaptation mode. I don't know when headsmen are going to be in Lagos. The campaign that you try to paint a beautiful picture of Lagos might not hold next month. So we need to be very quick in deployment of content that is relevant and on the beat to the conversations that are happening today. You basically have about 72 hours from ideation to production and deployment when it comes to content. Then we've spoken a lot about personalization. I'll just touch on it a little bit. A lot of digital today is social media. But I want to say this, that social media is actually just a small part of what digital will do, right? And I'll give you some context. The largest digital platform today, as a single platform, is Facebook. It's only at about 33 million users, right? If you compare that to the number of active mobile lines today, right? The stats put it up by 190 million. That's on the assumption that let's say 50% of people are using 2 lines, right? But that is still 100 million people. That is 100 million mobile phones in people's hands that you can reach. Way more than you would reach on any single digital platform. So we definitely need to look at digital. Some people still call SMS offline, right? But in my own opinion, any platform that can create the opportunity for two-way instant communication is digital, right? So we start to look at how do we really appreciate the channels for what they are. If I'm only talking to people on Facebook, on Instagram, if you drill down into the statistics, the number of people who would drink beer, for example, are not up to 7 million on digital platforms. Majority of them are still offline. Or still use mobile phones that are not actively data enabled, and they can be spoken to. So there are so many other channels that we can use to not just create one-way engagement, but two-way engagement that is relevant to these users. I'll give you an example. You can run polls that ask people questions via SMS, via USSD, that make them feel like they are part of a conversation at just a lighter level than you would do on social media or any other platform, right? Brands can go as far as saying, okay, if data is a barrier, how do I sponsor content so that the money I would have used to do expensive advertising on bigger platforms, how do I subsidize that so that people can receive my content and not have to pay for the data for it and consume that content, something that's called sponsored content, right, or sponsored browsing. And people will receive SMSs and they click and they look at this content in whatever form you presented it at zero cost to them, right? So you need to deepen the way you would engage with consumers going through the hurdles like data or device type and all those things that affect how people engage with brands. The other part I would say is, just before I round up, is it's important that brands should start to be omnipresent and omnichannel, not just in communication, but in product variation. And what I mean is this: when you are trying to create deeper relationships with consumers, even those that are not your existing customers, you're looking at a point where, oh, how do we start selling one toothpaste online, right? It's not going to ban because people don't shop like that. Yeah? How do I start selling one small sanitizer online? But the truth is, it doesn't have to be the core product that is delivered via that channel. The complementary product or the value-added product can create the experience that will lead to the consumption of the core product. And I'll give you a good example. If someone sells cleaning products, for example, right? Maybe a Dettol or something, and you are, instead of saying we can't sell the actual product itself, what we sell is a knowledge series or something that empowers thousands of people to start a cleaning business, right? And then they can go out and commercialize this skill. Now, some of the core products that will be used will be Dettol products, for example. What you've done is giving complementary products in form of knowledge. This is a combination of the education content and the empowerment content that people will consume and start to build relationships with brands. And you are delivering this digitally. What you've done is you've facilitated offline purchase with online products that you deliver in form of knowledge and empowerment. So you can adapt the product itself to create use cases that will be multi-channel. And then lastly, what I would say is two things. Strategic partnerships are very key. As a brand, you don't have it all. You may not be as embedded into culture as some other brands. Look for alignment, avoid competition, and partner with brands that are doing well on digital. And you create deeper relationships with consumers. And then double down on retention. It is way easier to retain your existing customers than to try to acquire new ones. In fact, 32% of first-timers will make a second purchase, but 53% of second-timers will make a third purchase. And for every 5% increase in retention, you see about minimum 25% increase in revenue because there is no cost for acquisition there. So it's very important that when you're building your engagement strategies, double down on retention strategies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, OT, for taking us into the